Uh, it is sort of an amalgam of the other two positions. It is not meant to be this committee's position at this point anyway. It is more to help us think about, where are we in our own thinking individually and then collectively. I think sometimes actually seeing language in bill form can help move things along a little bit faster. So I won't say anything more about it. I'll let Bradley read through the language. It's just 2 pages, 2.5 pages maybe. And then we can ask questions. We can have a quick conversation.
Be on the screen.
He's going to put it up.
Yes. And will it be in our committee page?
It's on our committee page now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Bradley Showman, Office of Legislative Counsel, and I will share my screen here. See the bill up on the screen, and you do. Great. Maximize this to make it more readable. Okay, and so this bill, as Chair Durfee stated, that this bill is kind of different than the other proposals that you've had. So it's meant to restore the pre-Taft Street status quo. And it also prohibits municipalities from regulating the right to grow food. And this bill does permits municipal regulation of the construction of farm structures in Tier 1A areas. And so and those are mostly downtown areas. So we'll go through. There's a findings and intent section that is pared down. It doesn't mention Taft Street. And it just says the intent of the the finding of the General Assembly is that it has been the intent and the controlling law that municipalities shall not regulate farming, including construction of farm structures. And it's the purpose of this act to reinstate that assumption, with the exception of construction of a farm structure within a Tier 1A area, as established in accordance with 10 VSA 6034. Okay, so the first section here, this language addresses Taft Street directly by saying that farming that meets the minimum threshold criteria in the required agricultural practices and is therefore required to comply with the required agricultural practices. And then it separates out the construction of a farm structure with the exception of farm structures in Tier 1A areas. And then here's an addition of what's been different so far is the right to grow food. And as I've discussed this with Ellen and also Mike, we're concerned about the language of creating a right to grow food. So we're just flagging this for you. This bill amends the municipal bylaw section in the Vermont statutes. And the right to grow food, the word right might be confused with by right zoning and create some ambiguity. Our recommendation would be to take out the right and just say to grow food. That's for the committee to consider in this as you debate. So the right to grow food includes the cultivation or other use of land for growing plants for food, including maple sap and orchard crops. And then the raising, feeding, or managing of livestock, excluding roosters, in compliance with the required agricultural practices rule, provided the land base is sufficient for appropriate nutrient and waste management as determined by the Secretary of Agriculture, Food, and Markets. Let's get to the rest of this. Some renumbering, we define farming, and we also define livestock. The same meaning in the statutes, and the effective date of the bill. A couple of things. I know that in the past, this committee has said that they may or may not want to address cannabis in this bill. So this does not address cannabis. However, there is another statute that does refer to this section that regulates cannabis, that would regulate cannabis in the same way. It would prohibit municipal regulation of the of growing cannabis in the same way that other kinds of farming would. And so if we amend this section, it would also kind of scoop up that other section, that other statute, and bring cannabis in to prohibit municipal regulation of growing cannabis. If this committee did not want that, we would recommend adding a statute to, or adding a section in this bill to delete that section. And so that's one thing to flag. It's 7 VSA 869F, as in Frank.
That's a classic illustration of the unintended consequence.
That's exactly right.
It's something that links to this that we're not looking at and don't know about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that's exactly right. So as we amend this, it would also affect that.
Thank you for flagging that. Yeah. And then there was one other thing, and then we'll take questions.
I do. I have another recommendation because there's this section with the raising the feeding, managing livestock in compliance with the required agricultural practices rule. If you have 99 chickens, 99 laying hens, that's not in compliant. They don't have to comply with the required agricultural practices rule unless they meet some other threshold, right? More than $2,000 in gross receipts, having more than 4 acres, something of that sort, right? And so raising those chickens wouldn't necessarily have to comply with the required agricultural practices rule. And then the rest of this says that provided the land base is sufficient for appropriate nutrient and waste management is determined by the Secretary of Agriculture. So the recommendation would be to ask the agency to make rules that would address scenarios that don't necessarily fall within the required agricultural practices rule. And so how do you manage 99 laying hens as opposed to 100 laying hens, or 14 goats as opposed to 15 goats, something like that. Asking the agency to create that rule and then also create a process for applying for a variance to do that. And so that would be a recommended session law section or something of the sort to effectuate this piece more effectively and make it clearer for people who might want to do this. And that's all I have for the committee. I'm happy to answer questions.
So just before we turn to the questions, why would a variance be needed? So you said, ask the agency to develop rules and then a process for asking for a variance.
So, the RAPS has variance requirements to, setback requirements for, certain gardens and things. They have a process for requesting kind of a variance to local other kinds of zoning and regulations and things of that sort. The word variance, I think, is not as, I don't mean that as a variance from municipal zoning, because this would prohibit municipal zoning. It would be trying to come up with a system in a way to ensure that someone who is doing this is complying or has received some kind of authorization saying, yes, this has sufficient land base and this has sufficient nutrient and waste management to have your 14 goats. And so some kind of permitting process to make sure that happens through the Secretary of Agriculture. Otherwise, it might be through municipal zoning to create some kind of process to make sure that is actually happening, and that could create some a patchwork there.
Okay, thank you. John first.
Yeah, a couple things. What happens? I mean, maybe we should get somebody from the AFM into to tell us this, but what happens when you meet the requirements? You're a farm because you meet the requirements of the RAPS, but upon inspection, you're like up here, you're not following the rules of the RAPS.
You get fined.
Yeah.
Right. So, but if you have 15 goats and whatever you're doing is not following the rules of the RAPS, is it still an agency problem, or can municipalities then come in and have a certain amount of jurisdiction?
Are you saying currently under current law or
Right.
previous?
Yeah, well, right, pre-Taft Street.
Pre-Taft Street law.
That would be an agency issue to find and ensure that there's compliance. They might have someone come out and say, this is what you did wrong, you need to fix it. Or give a fine, things of that sort. So they do have mechanisms to enforce the rules.
You gotta be a significant, in small farms like that, you gotta be a significant contributor to pollution.
Right, that's what I would assume, otherwise
Yeah.
it endless litigation, but and then also in the 14 or 15 goats. So if you don't meet the RAPS, then can municipalities have jurisdiction over the 14 goat farm?
So this would say no.
Okay,
Right. And so that's what this bill sets out to do, is to give individuals the right to, the phrasing is grow food, which includes raising, feeding, and managing livestock.
So let's definitely come back to this question. Or talking more about that point. And Greg, did you have a?
Yeah, so this is, which titles is the RAPS in, which title of the statute?
So the RAPS rule is just an administrative rule. So it's available on the Agency of Agriculture's website as an administrative rule. It's also posted on Lexis for the official rule. And
So, you know, where are the RAPS established?
the authorizing authority would be listed in the rule. I don't know the authorizing authority for the required agricultural practices off the top of my head. But the rule would state what statute authorizes rulemaking.
Ellen or Mike may have come in earlier in January and given us a presentation that might have shown that citation. So we can collect.
Then in Title 6 or Title 10, the RAF.
Title 6, Title 10 is what, activity?
6.
and then 24 is all municipal stuff, right?
Yeah.
John,
If we pass this as written, in tier 1A, municipality would not be able to regulate farming operations, but they would be able to regulate construction of a farm structure. Am I reading that correctly?
That is correct.
So does that mean if there's a farm existing in such an area and their barn burns down, or they need to build a new animal shelter, they could be told they can't do it?
So if there was already an existing farm in a tier 1A area and they wanted to build a farm structure or
Rebuild it.
structure.
Or if they
It's a-
needed, they needed to build another
Or
shelter
expand,
for,
right.
you know, they're added 10 sheep and their one's not big enough, so they build a new one.
Well, building a new one would certainly fall under this exception, right? If they're in a tier 1A area and they want to build a new facility to house more chickens, you know,
Why would we do that?
and
If it's an existing farm, why would we want to do that? Am I missing something?
Well, because
answer that question.
the Vermont leagues and cities and towns wanted to have control over what little acreage there was in tier 1A. Where I was concerned was where they wanted to go into tier 1B, which is the new and expansion. And tier 1A, they said, is their city centers, like where Taft Street, like may have been, I don't know the map for Essex. But downtown Burlington, downtown Montpelier, downtown Rutland, they want to have a little bit of control over that.
So I think that's more or less the answer to that question. But are you thinking, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that an existing farm could somehow be treated differently in statute than somebody creating a barn and a farm from scratch?
I'm just thinking if there are rare instances of an existing farm that needs to expand within their farm, they would be limited. Whereas someone, just because they happen to be 100 meters over that way, doesn't have that regulation.
So could we write in a grandfather clause? That if you're an existing farm in a tier 1A, you afford all the protections of a farm in tier 1B.
Just
Or
thinking.
tier 2.
And make a note of that grandfather clause of some sort.
And then a couple of other questions. One is this right to grow food. That's an expansion of what we had before. Intent, right?
yes, and that there is no other section in our law that refers to the right to grow food. And so some concern is creating a new right in this way is it could have potentially have unintended consequences or be confused where it's placed, which is in a municipal bylaw zoning statute. And so the recommendation would be to be mindful of the word right in the context of the statute might mean something different and cause confusion.
So are you thinking then that we could address that concern by saying bylaw shall not, under this chapter shall not regulate, again, this is municipal bylaws, instead of saying the right to grow food, say growing food?
Yeah, I think that would be perfect.
Rephrasing it that way, that would be enough to solve that problem.
I think so. I
Okay.
think so.
Well, then let's make a note of that too. And then I would say, and I'll look around to see if anybody feels differently. We can have the conversation, but doing whatever we need to do to ensure that we're not changing existing statute that allows or permits local government to regulate cannabis one way or the other, that either loosens it or tightens it. We don't want to be doing that here inadvertently. We certainly don't want to be doing it inadvertently. And I think if we want to do that intentionally, that's a different conversation and probably not one that would be limited to this committee. So, I mean, the entire conversation won't be limited to this committee for sure.
If I may,
Yes.
the authorizing statute for the RAPS is 6 BSA 4810 and 48108.
Yes.
Excuse me, 4810A.
Okay. John.
Why do we always do our effective dates in 1 July? It seems like this one ought to be on passage.
We could change it to be on passage and
Right.
Agree. Yeah. Thank you, John.
And sorry.
Yes, guys. Just want to wait till Bradley's done scribbling here. John.
Just a couple of things, like on your discussion, also, we should figure out what happens with, say, succession of a farm, like if it's grandfathered, oh, there's a farm here, but if either somebody buys it or even a family member takes it over, the same sort of thing, like oftentimes that's, gives a municipality a wedge to say this isn't the original farm anymore, so
How many
that's.
farms are we talking about in the 1A?
We're gonna,
You realize-
we're continuing to try and get answers to that question, and the agents, I've asked the agency to do some work on that. And the conservation districts may also be looking at it from a different set of information.
The other thing I just noticed was, Bradley, isn't there a sort of larger definition of farming as far as, like, this doesn't include flower farms, this doesn't include Christmas tree farms, those sort of weird one-offs that aren't food and they aren't livestock, but in certainly in the agency's mind.
Christmas tree would be silviculture. And I think that's.
Is it still farming though? I think it's farms, right?
we can pull the statute up and I can share my screen and we can take a
So
look.
do you want to avoid capturing something that we don't intend to capture?
I just want the whole set of farming to be included, so
Yeah.
if I have a farm that grows flowers for weddings,
That you're included.
I'm being, regulated by a municipality, whereas this person next door who has 100 chickens is not.
And so this bill does cite the statute. I'm going to switch to sharing my full screen. So, but farming. Yep. Farming means cultivation or use of land for growing food, fiber, Christmas trees, maple sap, horticultural or agricultural crops, orchard crops, raising, feeding, management of livestock, poultry, fish.
Better. So is this reference then?
Yeah, this is referenced in this bill.
Okay.
And then so this is all the things, I guess I don't need to read it to
Right.
committee, but
There's flower farms show up there. Yeah, horticulture.
And composting too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but does the right, if we're establishing a new, not right, so we'll stop using that word, but if we're also explicitly saying that towns can't regulate growing food, then I'm not sure that we're addressing your concern.
Well, if they're farms following the RAPs and I have a farm, if I'm,
So large farms following the wraps.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, so they're still.
that universe is included, including all these one-offs like Christmas trees and maple syrup.
Yeah,
But your ability to grow food may not extend to growing Christmas trees.
right.
Yes, yes. So this bill kind of, the definition of farming comes into effect with farms, right? Farms that are subject to the required agricultural practices procedure. When we're creating the opportunity for individuals to grow food in any municipal area. This bill defines what you can grow in a municipal area a little bit more narrowly. And so this bill defines what you can grow if you're not a farm, just in your backyard. The cultivation use of land for growing plants for food, including for maple sap and orchard crops. And so that's what you would be able to grow. And then you'd also be able to raise, feed, and manage livestock, excluding roosters, so long as you're in compliance with required agricultural practices, et cetera. And so that if you wanted more in there, then I think you'd have to expand the definition of what you're including in growing food.
Could you say, the right to grow food, which includes all definitions under farm?
Yeah, and essentially it would be
Horticulture, and Christmas trees and maple sap.
If we felt that we wanted to be that expansive, there are certainly ways to do it statutorily. I think we just want to be careful about being able to justify why are we adding that now.
Yeah.
So, and there may be good justification for it, but what was brought to us. So I just going back for a second here. This language is not identical to anything that was brought to us, but it doesn't go beyond, I think, the boundaries of what anybody brought to us. So it goes beyond boundaries of maybe one or maybe one other one, but not like of all of them. I did make the distinction, and this is somewhat arbitrary, between tier 1A, so I said tier 1A rather than tier 1, A and B. That may be a difficult lift for some people. And then I thought, let's also be mindful of the fact that there are zoning and municipal bylaws that control physical things, and then there are non-physical things like hours of operation. And we can think about them and talk about them differently here, and maybe that would help us get to some kind of to a point where more people would be able to buy into it. I don't know whether this is the right place or not.
It's not farm.
So, Greg, you had a question, I think, too.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I see part of the idea behind not including farm structures in tier 1A. I'm just trying to understand, I know VLCT mentioned that they would like to see, all farming activity regulated, I think is what this, if I'm remembering right, within tier 1A, regulated by municipalities.
Yeah.
I guess I would like more clarity on what their reasoning ultimately is for that. I think I can infer, but I would love to know.
They didn't say in tier 1A, they said anywhere where Act 250 is restricted. Because they have zoning and planning and that's 1A and 1B. 1B, if you come up and you draw your maps and you call this area 1B, housing is not under Act 250 jurisdiction anymore. So they said anywhere where it's not under Act 250 jurisdiction, they wanted to have zoning. And I have a problem with that in 1B. Because 1B can be some of our most beautiful arable farmland, period.
One of the things I think that will be helpful, if we can get it, and this is now a question of how long do we wait sitting here hoping that we can get it versus moving it forward, but would be like how much arable farmland or how much actual in production farmland is there in tier 1A and tier 1B? When we were looking at the pictures earlier during the working lands, there was a Winooski farm. And I meant to ask, where's the farm? I imagine in Winooski, it's probably.
Community garden, yeah.
Yeah.
Good, Joe.
So I guess we can have clarifying questions are welcome, and also, is this what we want to do? Questions of what do we want to do? So,
Getting the sense that if we need more information would be related just to tier one, because I'm not hearing any people saying that on the committee saying we should allow municipalities to control farming in tier two.
yeah. Yeah.
One question I had there was, do any municipalities have bylaws that would regulate what you do in your property that might affect your neighbor? Like I'm thinking, okay, he's got a right to grow food and I have a right to tap maple trees. So I grow a maple tree in my yard. In 20 years, you can't grow food anymore because it's shades.
Not for now.
There might be bylaws that regulate noise, sound, hours of operation, well, for businesses, but maybe not necessarily. We're not familiar with bylaws that say you can't plant a certain thing.
It's kind of weird that
It's-
he might have the right to grow food, but I have a right to grow a maple tree that would make it so he can't grow food.
And those are kind of like the sticky questions that would come up, right? And especially if you I don't want to say open the can of worms, right? But just kind of raise the issue and draw attention to the issue of what this could mean, what it means to grow more food, and those kind of potential conflicts that might arise between neighbors and things of the sort might be worth discussing and things of that sort. Because it does make a lot of sense if someone has a big maple tree and then all of a sudden there's a bunch of shade on their neighbor's yard and they can't grow anything. What's the solution there?
True of fruit trees.
And the same could be true of just about anything that someone might be upset about, a fence or something like that, right? It doesn't have to be related to agriculture. So some of these questions are as old as time.
That story building.
I'm just thinking about unintended consequences.
That's exactly right.
So Bradley, are you clear on what we?
So I was just about to go over that with you.
Okay.
So you'd like me to add a grandfather clause for tier 1A, growing to not a right, just growing food instead of the right to grow food. Would you like me to add a session law section on rulemaking about how someone could comply with asking?
Yeah, if you want to, right, if you be helpful for us to see that to better understand. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Changing it to on passage. I don't have a clear instruction on what you want me to do with cannabis.
We don't want cannabis, we don't want the law to change on cannabis.
So this
Do
will,
that.
okay.
You don't want to get.
I suppose the law on cannabis now is linked to what we're changing.
So,
I don't think we have, I don't think the committee can avoid changing the cannabis law.
that's fine. I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to say that it's okay to write some language that keeps in place ultimately the same on the ground.
And you want the post Taft Street or pre
Taft
Taft Street?
Street.
Pre Taft Street. Okay.
And if we need to think more about that, yeah, how we do that.
Because I think the pre Taft Street status quo would be that municipalities cannot regulate cannabis with some exceptions. And so there's more exceptions there. And so restoring the pre Taft Street status quo might enable more people to grow cannabis.
So let's talk about that. And maybe I'm confused, but we want to be clear on that it's not our intent, at least in this conversation, to change anything that had to do with cannabis up until May. And if there was something that was changed in May about cannabis, we should probably be clear on that too.
So how about this? I can draft something that would restore the pre-Taft Street status quo for cannabis. And then we can talk about what that status quo is when I show that.
Okay.
And then the committee can amend that language from there, or not amend, but we can change the
We
language.
workshopping, yeah.
Wasn't the reason for all the ducks because Essex could regulate his cannabis? So he brought in all the ducks to be a farm.
Well, he needed I think the fertilizer from the ducks was part of the operation, yeah. But I'm not sure that and it's,
I think that was part of the analysis for him, though. The part of it was to bring in the ducks to hit the required agricultural practices threshold to prohibit the municipality from regulating cannabis. I think that was part of the strategy. And ultimately, I think that's how the court landed too.
So I just wanted for clarity, I know you already said this, but I didn't understand how this right here, this bill you have in front of us would alter statute for cannabis.
So there exists another statute for cannabis that refers to this. And let me see if I can. It
Refers to that particular statute.
refers to the statute that we're changing. And let me just go back one more. And so that's how it would change. So now we're in Title VII that regulates cannabis, and that should be on the screen there. And a cultivator licensed under this chapter who initiates cultivation of cannabis outdoors on a parcel of land shall not be regulated by a municipal bylaw adopted under 24 VSA Chapter 117 in the same manner that required agricultural practices are not regulated by municipal bylaw under the statute that we're amending right here. And so this is the statute that is being amended, and that's before you on the table, or that is.
They have set.
Yes, yeah, and so cannabis also has some setback requirements, and then there's another provision that also kind of limits the growing of cannabis in a way that farming wouldn't be touched. Suffice to say is that once the committee amends this statute in this way, then cannabis would have a lot more exemptions from municipal bylaw regulation.
and this is specifically the growing food part.
And so this is it came up when we were looking into the growing of food, but I think it's actually up here in the 1A or the D1A. Because we're changing what the required agricultural practices, how we're using that language, and we're directing the Supreme. Well, we're saying it's the intent that the municipalities cannot regulate by bylaw things that are subject to the required agricultural practices rule, and then there's this other statute out there that kind of adopts that language, and so we think that cannabis will be brought in that way.
Good catch. So. Is that everything that we asked you to do?
Yeah. Yes. So I got a plan here.
So we'll if we can squeeze in some time tomorrow somewhere, and if we can do it at a time that you're available, Bradley, and have had time to make these changes,
Okay.
then we'll have you come in and take a look. I might put it on the agenda just so that everybody knows as committee. Bill markup and possible vote.
Okay.
If we aren't ready to vote, we won't vote. But if we are ready to vote, then we will vote.
Okay,
And I'm putting that out there partly so that anybody else who is paying attention and feels like that they have something important to contribute to this conversation and wants to do so should, be in touch and letting us know.
okay, Chair. Thursday morning, I've got the stakeholder group thing, so you have more discussion on this on Thursday morning.
Yeah, that's a different bill on Thursday morning.
Okay.
It's a technical housekeeping bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And that would be, if you need to not be here for that, you won't be missing no voting anyway.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
So we're back at 9:30 tomorrow, and thank you, everybody.
Yep. So.
Hey, guys.